Welcome back to the Deep Dive Stock Explorers.
Ready for another one?
Always. Today, we're taking a look at AST SpaceMobile. It's a company with a pretty bold plan
Bold is an understatement, I think.
to build the first and only space-based cellular broadband network.
That works with regular smartphones. You got that right? No special equipment needed.
And we're actually starting this deep dive with some big news.
Huge, even.
AST SpaceMobile just offered $400 million.
In convertible senior notes.
So is this a sign of, big confidence?
Or a desperate scramble for cash.
Maybe a little bit of both.
It's definitely a bit of a head-scratcher. But that's what we're here to unpack today, right? Along with, well, everything, AST SpaceMobile.
Their goals, their tech, and what their financials are telling us.
What's really fascinating to me is this news comes at a really pivotal moment for AST SpaceMobile. I mean, they're attempting something truly groundbreaking. It's hard to overstate it. They're aiming to provide global cellular broadband directly to unmodified smartphones.
From space.
Exactly, from space. Imagine, no more dead zones, even in the most remote corners of the world.
I mean, that's a pretty mind-blowing concept. You could change everything, the way we connect, work, live. But how realistic is it, really?
Well, let's start by understanding their business model. AST SpaceMobile, they're not looking to replace your current cell phone provider.
Thank goodness.
Right. I mean, can you imagine the disruption? Instead, they want to partner up with mobile network operators, or, as you often hear, MNOs. They're aiming to be like this super wholesale provider.
So they'd be like the behind-the-scenes player, quietly providing the coverage, while the MNOs, they handle all those customer relationships.
Exactly. It's a win-win, ideally. MNOs, they expand their coverage, right? And they don't have to deal with the insane cost of building towers in these remote areas. And on the flip side, AST SpaceMobile taps into this massive existing customer base.
Okay, that makes sense from a business perspective, I get it. But how does this space-to-cell phone thing even work? I'm having trouble picturing it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it. But it's actually quite similar to how those traditional cell towers work, just on a, well, much grander scale.
Of course, it's space.
Yeah.
Everything's grander.
Exactly. AST SpaceMobile launches these powerful satellites into low Earth orbit. Each one's equipped with these massive antennas, and these antennas, they act like giant cell towers in the sky, communicating directly with smartphones down here on the ground.
So no need for special antennas or anything like that. That's actually impressive.
That's the key to their whole innovation. Their
Right.
system is designed to work with the phones we already have.
That's smart.
Right. And they've already shown they can get these satellites up there. Back in September 2024, they successfully launched 5 first-generation commercial satellites. They call them Block 1.
5 satellites in orbit. That's a big step. Are these the ones that will ultimately provide the global coverage?
Not quite. Think of Block 1 as kind of a test run, dipping their toes in the water.
A very expensive toe dip.
That's for sure. They're already working on the next phase, Block 2 satellites. Even more powerful, with larger arrays, custom-designed chips. The works. All to handle even more bandwidth and cover much wider areas.
So they're scaling up fast. But let's be honest, space ventures, they're notoriously expensive. I mean, this is rocket science after all.
Oh, absolutely. Space is not for the faint of heart or the light of wallet. And that brings us to their financial situation. As a pre-revenue company, AST SpaceMobile, well, they're still in the investment phase, which means, yep, they're spending a lot of money.
To develop and actually deploy this network, it's a gamble.
A calculated one, hopefully.
And that's where that $400 million convertible note offering comes in. I mean, they clearly need a lot of cash to keep this operation moving forward.
It's a lifeline, really. A significant lifeline, I should say. But it does give us a little peek into their strategy. It tells us they're betting big on their technology, their ability to secure those partnerships with the MNOs.
As of September 30, 2024, they had $518.9 million in cash and cash equivalents on hand.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a lot, right?
It does.
But keep in mind, they're burning through it pretty quickly. That's the nature of the beast at this stage.
So a lot of spending, no income yet, and they're aiming for global coverage. That's a lot of pressure on their financials, to say the least. Where's all that money going?
Well, if we take a closer look at their unaudited, condensed, consolidated statements of operations, it can tell us a lot. Their biggest expenses are in engineering services, which, given the sheer complexity of their technology, makes sense. Then, of course, there's those general and administrative costs.
The unglamorous side of business.
Always necessary, though. And then there's research and development, obviously crucial for a company pushing the boundaries like AST SpaceMobile. They've got to keep innovating.
It sounds like a really delicate balancing act. You have to invest heavily to develop this cutting-edge tech while also keeping a very close eye on that burn rate.
Precisely. And this is where understanding those financial ratios becomes absolutely crucial. These ratios, they provide invaluable insights into their financial health, stability, the whole picture.
Okay, I'm all for deep dives, but sometimes, I'll be honest, those financial statements, they feel like a whole different language.
They can be intimidating, no doubt, but we can break it down.
Can you give me some examples of what ratios we should be looking at? Like, where do I even start?
Sure. Let's start with the debt-to-equity ratio. This one's important. It tells you how much debt they're using compared to their equity. Gives you a sense of their financial risk, basically.
Okay, debt to equity ratio, got it.
Another really key one is the current ratio. This one shows you their ability to meet their short-term obligations. Like, can they cover those immediate costs, or are they struggling?
Debt to equity, current ratio, noted.
Mm.
That's definitely information I'll be looking for when I'm doing my own research.
It's a good starting point, for sure.
But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, anything else about their financials that really stands out to you? Any red flags or, I don't know, hidden gems?
Let's see. Well, they have secured a contract with the U.S. government.
Oh, interesting. What's that for?
It's for non-commercial satellite use. It's not their primary focus,
So
obviously.
that focuses on those smartphones.
Exactly. But it does bring in some revenue. Plus, they plan to generate some income from selling gateway equipment to those MNO partners we talked about.
This is like a multi-pronged approach to revenue.
You could say that, but their real goal, the big kahuna, is to launch a limited commercial service targeted at specific areas initially. This initial rollout, it could be a key indicator, really, of their potential to scale up to that ambitious global network. It's a crucial stepping stone.
So some initial revenue streams, that's good.
Mhm.
But the real test, that's the commercial service launch. We've covered a lot in this first part of our AST Space Mobile deep dive.
A lot to think about. We've explored their vision, their business model, all the tech behind it, and we even started peeking into those financial statements.
We're just getting started.
Exactly. This is just the beginning. There's much more to uncover.
That's right, Stock Explorers. Stick with us, because in the next part of our AST Space Mobile deep dive, we're going to tackle those risk factors.
We'll explore the challenges they face, the competitive landscape, what investors need to really consider before jumping on board this, shall we say, space-bound venture.
We'll be back soon with part 2. And hey, while you're waiting, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, give this episode a like. You know the drill. It helps more people find these deep dives. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, Stock Explorers.
Back for more on AST Space Mobile.
You know it. Last time we talked about, well, a lot.
Their business model, the tech behind it, and gave everyone a glimpse into their financial picture. A lot to take in.
But before anyone runs out and buys ASTS stock, there's some risks we need to talk about. Oh, yeah, definitely. Like any investment, there's inherent uncertainties, especially in a field like this.
So let's dive into those. What are some of the biggest challenges AST SpaceMobile is facing? What's keeping you up at night?
Well, to be honest, one of the biggest things is just the sheer scale of what they're trying to do.
It's ambitious, that's for sure.
Ambitious is putting it mildly. We're talking about launching and then operating a constellation of hundreds of satellites. Each one costs millions of dollars. And that's just to create a truly global network.
And then there's the ground infrastructure too, right? Gateways, network management systems, the partnerships with the MNOs. It's global, like you said. A massive undertaking.
Absolutely. And any little delay or setback in that whole process, whether it's manufacturing the satellites, getting those launch schedules lined up, securing the agreements with the MNOs, it can all have a ripple effect.
Yeah, timelines are never set in stone, especially with something like this. Costs could escalate quickly. Anything else investors should be wary of? What are some of the other things that come to mind?
Competition. The space-based internet arena is getting crowded and fast.
Right, SpaceX's Starlink is already out there.
And they're deploying their own constellation and racking up customers at an impressive rate. They're a major player.
So how does AST SpaceMobile plan to stand out? I mean, the market's getting crowded.
They're betting on their direct-to-smartphone connectivity being the key.
Right, no special equipment.
Just seamless integration with, well, the billions of devices we already use every day. It's a strong selling point, for sure.
It is, but
Yeah.
is it enough?
Yeah.
I mean, Starlink offers a pretty viable solution already, even if it does require that separate antenna.
That's the million-dollar question.
Or, in this case, the $400 million question.
Right. They have to prove their tech not only works, but that it's a better experience and at a price that makes sense.
And those partnerships with the MNOs, those are crucial, right?
Totally. They're the gatekeepers to the customers. It's all about access.
So how are they approaching those partnerships? What's the pitch?
Basically, they're saying, look, our network lets you expand your coverage, offer better service, and you don't have to shell out the cash to build new towers in the middle of nowhere. Plus, there's the potential for revenue sharing. That's always appealing.
Okay, so there's incentive for the MNOs. But let's be real. Big telecom companies, they're not known for embracing new tech quickly.
That's fair. AST SpaceMobile have a lot of convincing to do.
They have to show these companies that their network's reliable, secure, and that it can integrate with what's already out there. It's a tall order.
It is. And even if they manage all that, the tech hurdles, the competition, getting the MNOs on board, there's the regulatory landscape.
Oh, right. Operating in space.
Yeah.
Must come with a whole other rule book.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole other level of complexity. To operate globally, they're going to need approvals and licenses in every single country they want to cover.
So, a patchwork of regulations. It sounds like a legal team's worst nightmare.
It's a challenge for sure. Regulatory changes, political instability, spectrum allocation issues, any of those things could really throw a wrench in the works. And then, of course, there's the financial side of things.
Right, we talked about their burn rate, and they're spending a ton to get this off the ground. Even with that $400 million, it still feels a bit precarious.
It is. What if their projections are wrong? What if it all takes longer or costs more than they expect? They'll need more capital.
And with interest rates where they are, investors are getting skittish.
Right, so getting more funding might not be easy. And if they have to raise capital on bad terms, that could dilute the value of existing shares. It could even put their whole plan at risk.
So huge potential rewards, but the risks are definitely there too.
Exactly. Investors need to understand both sides of the coin.
Okay, so we've got tech risks, competition, the MNO partnerships are still uncertain, complex regulations, financial vulnerabilities. This is a lot to take in.
It is. That's why those financial ratios are so important. They help you assess how healthy and stable AST SpaceMobile really is.
Can you remind us why those ratios are so key? What do they tell us about whether they can actually pull this off?
Well, take the debt-to-equity ratio, for instance. It tells you how much they're relying on borrowed money compared to their own equity. A high ratio, that's a red flag. It means they're heavily leveraged, which can be risky, especially if they need to go looking for more funding.
And the current ratio, that was the other one you mentioned.
Right. That one basically shows you if they can pay their bills, can they meet those short-term obligations. If that ratio is low, that's a warning sign.
So even with millions in cash, if they can't manage the day-to-day, that's not good. Are there other ratios we should be watching?
Absolutely. Gross profit margin is a big one. It tells you how much profit they're actually making on sales once you subtract the cost of everything involved.
Which, in their case, includes building and launching those satellites, right?
Exactly. A healthy gross profit margin means they've got their costs under control and can price their services competitively. All these ratios, and there are others, can give you a much clearer picture of their overall financial health.
Okay, I see how those ratios can really tell a story about their financial strength. But I'll admit, financial statements can be a bit intimidating.
I hear you. But there are tons of resources out there to help make sense of it all. You don't need to be a Wall Street wizard.
And once you have a grasp on those ratios, you can start comparing AST SpaceMobile to the competition.
Exactly. How does their debt-to-equity ratio stack up against Starlink's, for example? What about their profit margins? It gives you a sense of their relative strengths and weaknesses.
And it's important to remember, even with all these risks, AST SpaceMobile is in a really exciting field, global internet connectivity. That demand's only going to go up. The potential rewards are huge if they can actually make this work.
The key is to balance those potential rewards against the risks. Do your research, analyze those financial statements, really dig into the competitive landscape.
Solid advice. So we've looked at the risk factors, stressed those financial ratios. What's next? Where do we go from here in this AST SpaceMobile deep dive?
We've talked about the potential and the pitfalls. Now it's time to tackle a different kind of beast.
With the regulatory landscape.
Because, even with amazing tech and solid financials, if you can't navigate the regulatory hurdles, it's game over.
Especially in telecom, And with AST SpaceMobile's global goals.
Exactly. Buckle up, stock explorers, because we're about to go deep into the world of international regulations, spectrum allocations, and all the challenges they face trying to make this space-based network a reality.
Welcome back, stock explorers, to the final part of our AST SpaceMobile deep dive.
We've covered so much ground already.
We have their business model, that groundbreaking technology, those financials, and of course the competition.
And as promised, we're tackling the regulatory maze.
Because even with amazing technology, a solid financial foundation, if a company can't get past the regulatory hurdles,
It's a no-go.
game over.
Exactly, especially in a field as complex as telecom.
And with a vision as global as AST SpaceMobile's.
Right, we're talking about satellites providing cell service all over the world.
Talk about a lot of red tape.
Tons of it. International agreements, national regulations, licensing requirements.
I'm getting lost already.
It's a lot to untangle, for sure.
Where do we even start with this regulatory web?
Well, let's start with the basics. Radio spectrum.
Okay, back to basics.
It's the range of electromagnetic frequencies, basically the airwaves that our phones and our Wi-Fi use.
So spectrum is like the highway for all those wireless signals.
That's a good way to think about it.
Limited space, though.
Exactly, just like a real highway, and access is tightly controlled.
Governments decide who gets to use which frequencies, right?
Exactly, they allocate them to companies.
Through licensing.
Right, spectrum licensing.
So AST SpaceMobile needs permission, basically, to use those frequencies for their satellite-to-cellular communication.
Yep, and not just one license, multiple licenses.
In every country.
Every single one where they want to operate.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It is. Luckily, there are organizations that try to simplify things a little.
Oh, good.
The International Telecommunication Union,
Never heard of it.
the ITU for short, they help coordinate the global use of spectrum.
So they set the standards?
Yep, they allocate frequency bands, and they even help resolve disputes between countries.
So they're kind of like the global traffic cops for the airwaves.
Huh, that's one way to put it. But even with the ITU, each country still has its own regulations and procedures.
So AST SpaceMobile can't just get a blanket approval and call it a day.
Nope, they have to work with each country individually.
And it's not just about getting those licenses right. It's about whether the spectrum is even available.
Right, some countries might have more available spectrum in the frequencies AST SpaceMobile needs.
While others might have already allocated those frequencies to something else.
Exactly, and even if it is available, that licensing process.
Lengthy and expensive.
You got it. Detailed technical plans, financial stability, all sorts of requirements.
And I imagine there's competition for those licenses.
Oh, absolutely. Existing telecom companies, they aren't exactly thrilled about a new player.
Shaking things up.
Right. They often have a lot of influence in the regulatory process.
Lobbying against new licenses.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the rules, it's about the politics.
Playing the game.
AST SpaceMobile needs to be savvy.
Absolutely. Not just technically compliant, but good at building those relationships.
With regulators.
Policymakers, even their competitors.
What's a balancing act?
It really is. And on top of that, regulations are constantly changing.
Keeping up must be a full-time job.
It is. AST SpaceMobile needs to stay on top of those changes.
Or else?
Fines, delays, even losing those licenses, which would be disastrous.
So we've got spectrum scarcity, national regulations, a tough licensing process, political maneuvering, and the constant need to stay updated.
Welcome to the world of telecom regulation.
What a jungle.
And we haven't even touched on the geopolitical factors yet.
Oh, right. Global means dealing with a whole range of different political systems.
Levels of development, views on foreign investment.
Especially when you're talking about something as important as telecommunications.
It's a strategic sector, for sure. Some countries will welcome AST SpaceMobile. Others will be more hesitant.
Some might even be hostile.
It's possible. They need to be really diplomatic.
Culturally aware.
And flexible, able to adapt their business model and their tech to different environments.
It's a global chess game.
With high stakes.
So for investors, regulatory risk is a major factor to consider.
Absolutely. The big question is, have they been successful in getting those necessary approvals in key markets?
Makes sense. What else should investors be looking at?
The overall regulatory environment in those countries they're targeting. Are those countries known for being pro-innovation, or are they more protectionist?
Do your homework on the countries AST SpaceMobile wants to operate in.
Right, and watch out for any potential regulatory changes, disputes over spectrum allocation, anything that could disrupt their operations.
Means they're always changing.
Always, staying informed is key.
Okay, so we've gone deep on AST SpaceMobile.
We've explored their vision, the tech, the financials, the competition, and now this complex regulatory landscape.
So what's the bottom line? What should our listeners take away from all of this?
AST SpaceMobile is a company with a bold vision, no doubt. They want to change the world by beaming cellular broadband straight to our phones from space.
It's a vision with huge potential, but there are significant risks.
Tech challenges, financial pressures, fierce competition, and these constantly shifting regulations, it's a lot to overcome.
But they're in a fast-growing sector.
With a massive market.
The demand for global internet connectivity is only going to keep growing.
If AST SpaceMobile can pull this off, the rewards could be enormous.
But it's high risk, high reward.
Investors need to do their research.
Weigh the pros and cons.
Make an informed decision that aligns with your goals.
And your risk tolerance.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Knowledge is power, stock explorers. Dig into those financials, keep an eye on those regulations, and most importantly, ask questions.
The more you understand AST SpaceMobile, the better your decisions will be.
As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Head over to Stock Explorers and let's discuss AST SpaceMobile.
And all things investing.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into AST SpaceMobile. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, activate notifications, and give this episode a like.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into another fascinating company.
So stay